Okay.
Said, like, there's a certain breakfast, you read it 10A, you asked the question.
Got it. Okay, 47B2. We're at 47B2 all the way in the bottom. Mem Zayin Bays. Let's jump in. We're talking about the last few lines. Tanya Rav Chia. You see that? Tanya Rav Chia? Last paragraph on 47B2. Rav Chia taught the following brisa. Cherem, a fishnet, shebein tchumei Shabbos, which is between two Shabbos tchum areas in water. Okay, so meaning, right? In other words, you have you see the picture. I'm not going to paint it. Okay, you see the picture over here, right? What you're looking at over here is two bodies of water, and each one has their own tchum, right? In other words, one is part of, so you see city A in the middle, city B in the middle, like there's two islands, let's just say, okay? That's the way they're doing it. And then you have a tchum around it. The square is the tchum around it, and then in between, and then square around the other islands, and in between, you have a fishnet. You have a fishnet which goes down in between these two places. Okay? So, says the Brisa, Tzarich, the body of water needs mechitza shel barzel afsiko. The fishnet is not enough to divide the two waters. Rather, you need an iron partition to divide them. What this means, if the people in the islands want to draw water, they can't do so. They can't do so. Why? Because the water that's in between is coming and going, is coming from this place and that place, and therefore, or it's not really part of their tchum. And meaning there's water that may have been in tchum A that is now in tchum B, and therefore you can't draw that water because it's water, i.e. objects which came from beyond your tchum on Shabbos. The only way to do so, the Gemara says, the only way to do so is to place this iron partition between it. Now wait, the Gemara is going to analyze this. So first, before we analyze this, Mechayech alei Rav Yossi Bar Chanina. Rav Yossi Bar Chanina heard this brisa, and he basically like he laughed at it. He mocked it. He's like, nah, no. Okay. Okay. Well, no, doesn't say your name. Okay. So my time they asked, why did Rav Yossi, the son of Rav Chanina, laugh at it? If it's because Rav Chia taught the view of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who says that water, if you say it's because the brisa is going like Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who says that water has a tchum. Meaning, this brisa is clearly going. We had a machlokas earlier, Rav Yochanan ben Nuri and the Chacham in the Mishnah, whether an object, an ownerless object, whether or not it has a tchum. According to Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, it stops at 2,000 amos. It can't go beyond that. According to the Chacham, it doesn't have a tchum, but that goes in two directions. What that means it doesn't go in any, but it actually has a leniency, because it means if someone picks it up. And then if someone on Shabbos, is there a hefker object on Shabbos? It doesn't have a tchum, but if you pick it up on Shabbos and you're able to go beyond that measurement, that space, it follows the new owner. So this brisa, which says that you pick up this water, you're not allowed to use this water, right? Because maybe it's going beyond the tchum. That's going like the opinion of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who is the more stringent view, and we don't hold like him. Is that why he laughed at it? Because the iu sphere like Rabban Lekula? Because he holds of the rabbi's leniency. The rabbis hold that if you pick up that water, it follows the tchumim of the new owner, of the person who assumes ownership. And because Rav Yosef, the son of Chanina, holds a more lenient view, he's going to laugh at someone who holds stringent view? That makes no sense. Right? In other words, is this issue with the fact that the brisa, again, what's the premise of this brisa? The premise of this brisa is that the water already is limited, because when Shabbos began, the water had 2,000 amos, and maybe the water goes beyond the 2,000 amos. Right? That's the concern. But and is his issue? So he laughed at it. Is the issue? So why is he laughing at it? He's laughing at it because it goes like that more stringent view, i.e. the view of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri. There's a more lenient view, and it's the majority view who holds that no, it assumes the tchumin of the one who draws the water, the one who picks it up, and therefore there wouldn't be a reason to laugh at it, because just because it picks one opinion over the other, that's a reason to say this brisa makes no sense. You with me? Yeah? So the Gemara says further. El Mishum Titania. Maybe it's because of Tana Brisa. Nahoros Amoshchos, Mayanos Anovim, Harahinki Ragli Kol Adam. Because, and we saw this earlier, in the context of clouds, that flowing streams and gushing springs, they are not limited by Tchum. Right? We spoke about this by clouds. Why do we say you're allowed to use the rainwater? Because what? Because they're never lo naidi, they're never resting, right? The clouds are moving. And therefore, when an object is resting, so this has, if this Gemara be somewhere and it's not, and it's ownerless, it has a tchum, right? It's going to have different tchum laws. But if something is constantly in motion, it never started anywhere because it never was stationary anywhere, and maybe that's the reason. Gemara says that won't be a reason to laugh at this brisa, right? And obviously, this brisa holds the water; it does have tchum. Maybe we're talking about the quarry where it's gathered water; it's not moving, right? That water's stationary. That whole statement was said about streams, about clouds, but if it's stationary water, then maybe it does have a tchum, right? So again, we're still trying to figure out why did Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina laugh at this brisa. And again, but I just want to point out what this means, laugh at this brisa. He's not like, if you taught him a Mishnah, you taught him a pasuk in the Torah, he doesn't like it, he's not going to laugh at it. So I just want to be very clear. Remember, we have Mishnayos, which are like sanctioned, which are thoroughly researched, and we all agree that this is like legit, authoritative. Brisas are a little bit tricky. The word brisa, the word bar, means not sun. In Aramaic, the word bar means outside. Like it didn't make the cut. It was left on the, what do they call it? On the, what do they call that? Cutting floor. Thank you. Right? It's left on the cutting floor. It wasn't, it doesn't have the same authority. So that's where with Bryces, we already saw yesterday a little bit like, maybe only said about Mishnayos, maybe said about Bryces. We always, with Bryces, we're a little bit more skeptical. We don't take it, if it's a Mishnah, like nothing to talk about. The Brysa, there's always a little bit, there's a little bit of tension because of the fact that it didn't make the cut. And so I just want to be clear. It's not like he didn't like a teaching, so he's going to laugh at it. That's not how we act. The Gemara is, over here we're talking about a quoted brisa, and the notion of laughing at it is a way of saying like, no, this brisa was never taught. That's what he's saying. He's saying this was never really a teaching. You messed up. Like this is not really an authoritative teaching. Like this doesn't exist, and that's what we're trying to figure out now. Is it because this? We say no, doesn't make sense. There wouldn't be a reason to dismiss it. Is it because this? It wouldn't be a reason to dismiss it. It's because it was taught in the Brisa. Maybe because it's taught in the Brisa. The Brisa, this alleged Brisa said, it needs an iron partition to separate it and prevent the waters from mixing. And the Gemara, and he says, and why wouldn't a partition of reeds or a net, fish net, why would that not be sufficient? Because water might go through it. Even if you have a partition of iron, water is also going to go through. Now, it's not so clear what the Gemara means by that. If it's a good partition of iron, water won't go through. So two possibilities. One is, when it says a partition, mechitza by definition means 10 tvachim. So it just means that the Brisa sounds like it's saying, not that you need to have water, iron going all the way from top to bottom. It just means you have 10 tvachim of iron, and that would be sufficient, right? Or that, and therefore the Gemara is saying, so water's still going through. You just have this nice wall, but water's still going through. Alternatively, back in the day, you would not be able to make a partition of iron that is waterproof. Nowadays you have underwater, tunnels and all that. But the Gemara is saying, even if you have one up to, top to bottom, there's no way they're making one that's strong enough that's not that's completely not porous, that no water is going to seep through. Water's going to seep through. So what are you talking about when you say that no water is going back and forth? One way or another, the Gemara is asking, that can't be the issue, because if the reason of having this iron is because water is not going through, water is going through. So the Gemara says, maybe what the Brisa meant is exactly that. It was saying it like facetiously. It's saying if you have a fish net, it's not good. What you need is a wall of iron, and there's no such thing. In other words, it's saying if you have this case, we have these two islands, over here, and you have water over here, there's no way really to divide the water. That's essentially what it's saying. It's not saying you need to have, it's like saying you need to have the impossible, which means it can't be done. Then maybe that's what the Bryce is saying. The Gemara is saying that can't be. So the Gemara says the reason that he takes issue with it is because there is a leniency with water. What is the leniency? Rabbi Tavla. Rav Tavla asked the following. Rav Tavla asked Rav, okay, let's say you have two. You have two chatzeros, you have two courtyards, okay, and one of them has an eruv, one of them doesn't have an eruv, and we have this principle: if things open up one to another, and one area is forbidden, then it's going to cause the other area adjacent to it to be forbidden, right? In other words, you have one area which would be kosher, would be fine. This area has its own eruv and whatever, but it's adjacent to an area which is not. Okay, so if it's open directly into an area you can't carry, that then invalidates the entire area which you should be able to carry, right? Normally you have to have some partition, a lechi, whatever, this and that, or you have to have a wall, right? But over here we're talking about a churba. You're talking about a destroyed place. So you have this suspended, broken partition. In other words, like this. Okay, we're back. You have okay, I don't know how to do this dimensionally. I don't know. Okay. What?
We'll fill it.
You'll fill it in? Okay, whatever. Again, this is the bird's eye view, right? You have two places. This one is good, this one's not good. But they're open to one another, okay? So this is the bird's eye view. They're open to one another. And since they're open, you will not be able to carry. This is supposed to be squared. It's not meant to look like, I don't know. Okay, so now this is now a straight view. And basically what we have over here is not a wall between them, but rather I'm now making a picture here. And the wall is suspended, right? So it's because it's a churba, it's a destroyed area. And so the wall between them is a suspended wall, right? So blah blah blah. So basically, it's like a suspended wall, right? And he asks, is a suspended wall enough to create this partition between them, right? Is this suspended wall that's hanging, is that enough to make a partition? That wasn't so bad. So the Gemara says, so he says, a suspended partition permits carrying only if it's suspended over water. He says this notion of a suspended wall does not work in a physical space, but in water, if you have two bodies of water, it would work. So let's say you have two, if you're making Eruvin chatzeros, whatever the exact example is, you have two courtyards, and instead of this being, much easier to find. So instead of this being, this area, let's say, is now water, okay, between them, and then you put this suspended wall for whatever halachic ramifications, this suspended wall would work while it's in water. It's a leniency because in water it's very hard to make a wall, right? So in other words, there's a reason that they didn't have underground tunnels until a little while ago, because it's very hard to do a proper wall underground in water, and therefore a suspended wall is a leniency by water, and therefore what? And therefore, so now what does it do with anything? So what this is explaining why Rav Yosef son of Charina laughed about our case. Because in the Bryce it said that when you have that fishnet wall, it's not a good wall between the tchumim. And he says, what are you talking about? We have Rav telling us that with water, we are lenient about different types of walls because it's impossible to make a proper wall. And therefore a fishnet wall, tevach wall, would be a good partition. So don't tell me that, so this Bryce, he's rejecting this Bryce because we know that there's a leniency across the board with water, that a more inefficient or a non-ideal wall would be a good, sufficient wall. And therefore here too, the fishnet wall should be a good wall. You shouldn't have to have a wall of iron. And we see that from Rav, and that's why he said this Brisa can't possibly be true, because we know that a wall, even a weak wall, is going to be a good wall when it comes to bodies of water, to separate them. Okay? Says the Gemara further. 48a2. Okay, so we had the Brisa, which taught us the scenario where a person falls asleep before Shabbos begins, right? And he wakes up, it's Shabbos already, right? So Rav Yochanan ben Nuri says he gets tchum 2,000 amos in each direction, no problem. The Chachamim, now the Brisa, now our Mishnah, over here to quote from the Mishnah, the Chachamim said he has only 4 amos, and then Rav Eliezer comes along and says he's in the middle of those amos. In other words, he really only has 2 amos in each direction, and then Rav Yehuda says he's allowed to walk 4 amos in any direction he chooses. Okay? So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yehuda had a Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda, who says he has 4 amos in every direction, is exactly what the Chum said. The Chum says he has 4 amos, and Rabbi Yehuda says he has 4 amos. What's the difference? Amarava, Shmona al Shmona ikabenayu. The difference between them is 8 amos in each direction. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim, who were going, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was the first opinion. He says you have 2,000 amos in each direction. The Chacham say, no, you have 4 amos. Now, we initially understood 4 amos meaning 4 amos in total. But the truth is, if he said his line, if the Chum said their line in response to Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, Rav Yochanan ben Nuri says I have 2,000 amos, meaning 2,000 amos go in this way, 2,000 go this way, 2,000 go this way. And the Chum say you have 4 amos. What does that mean? Not 4 amos in total, but 4 amos in each direction. Meaning you really have 8 amos in 8 amos this way, 8 amos that way. Rabbi Yehuda came along and said 4 amos. It meant literally only 4 amos. Yeah. So there's a big debate. The Chachamim are saying 8 by 8, and Rehuda is saying 4 by 4. Meir, who is presumably the Tanakama of our Mishnah, says you have 8 amos by 8 amos. Okay, Rava says, to clarify, machlokes lahalech. There are disputes about 4 amos or 8 amos between the Chachamim / Meir, who says 8 amos, and Rabbi Yehuda says 4 amos, is only about walking, meaning tchum issues. Are you allowed to walk this far? But if you're in a public domain on Shabbos, and you don't have an Eruv, L'taltel, Divrei Kol Arba Amos in, Tfeilo. You're only allowed to carry 4 amos. In other words, this machlokes of one opinion saying you're allowed to go 8 amos is only about a tchum. So again, bottom line halacha is that if, let's say, a person started Shabbos, and they're outside, they're outside the tchum. Someone they found themselves outside the tchum. Either they were sleeping when Shabbos began, they're on the road, and now Shabbos begins, or they just walked beyond their tchum. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you have 2 amos in each direction. According to Rav Yehuda, you're going to have according to the Chachamim, meaning and Rameir, you have 4 amos in each direction. According to Rav Yehuda, according to the Chachamim, you have 8 amos in each direction, right?
What?
No, you have 8 amos in total. 8 amos in total. And according to Rav Yehuda, you have 4 amos in one direction. That's all you have. But everyone agrees you're only allowed to carry 4 amos. In other words, because you're in the Rishus Harabim, when you have no Eruv, what you're allowed to do, generally tell people don't carry it all when you're in the public domain. But in theory, if you're in a place where there's no Eruv, and for whatever reason you have to carry something, there's something on the floor. The class example the Gemara is going to give is, let's say you want to drink a cup of water, and there's a cup of water over there, so you're allowed to go ahead. You're in the public domain, you can't walk around with it. But let's say you're allowed to take it from over here, a foot away, 2 feet away, take it over here, drink it, put it back down. That would be totally fine with Rishus Harabim. In general, no Eruv. We try not to carry anything. Okay, ask the Gemara, where do we find these 4 amos like alluded to? Like, where's this all coming from? This is the rabbis just pulling this out of their hat. Like, what is where is this 4 amos thing coming from? Kedetanya, it's on the Brisa, Shvu ish tachtav. Pasuk in Shmo says each person should sit in their place. Okay, sit and literally means tachta means underneath them. They should sit underneath them. Okay, so what does this mean? And there's a reference to Shabbos. Kitachtav, he's restricted to an area which is like underneath him. Okay, the kamatachtav, how much is the area underneath him? So the Gemara says, Gufo shalosh amos. A person's body when they lie down is about 3 amos. Okay, 3 amos is about 6 feet, okay? The amma kadei lifshod yadav raglav, and an additional 2 feet in order to stretch your arms and legs. Okay, we don't assume a person's gonna just like sit in one motion, but rather you're gonna go stretch, fine. So you have a total of 4 amos. Meir, Yehuda Omer, Gufo shalosh amos, person's body is 3 amos. The amma kadei sheyitol chayfetz mitachas margalosav, miniach tachas merashosav, and you have an additional amma, take an object from under your feet and place it under your head. In other words, we assume what this means, there's gonna be like some movement. There's some movements on Shabbat, you don't have to, when we say like standing, we don't, just like the first opinion says stretch, the second opinion says, okay, you don't just like stand still, but like you might do things, you might like go over here, move things over here, so there's gonna be movement, and because of that extra movement, you're gonna have an extra amma. My benayu, they're both ultimately saying 4 amos, 3 amos for your body, 1 amma for stretching or for grabbing objects. The difference is whether or not it's like exact 4 amos or whether it's like a loose 4 amos, right? Sometimes you can have like exact measurements. One of them is saying exact, one of them is saying slightly larger. Okay, machlok is about which one's which, but the point is they both more or less say 4 amos. Okay, Amalei Rashash Livrei. Rashash says to his son, when you go to Rapapa, ask him the following question. The 4 amos that were said, the amadi. Do we give a person a subjective amma? An amma, where's the word? The amma, the notion of amma comes from what? Where do we get this measurement from? It comes from basically what amma ultimately means is this part of a body, like the forearm, I guess, of a body from the elbow till the middle finger. In other words, this space is an amma. Is it subjective? In other words, one person's going to get a much smaller amma, one person's going to get a much larger amma. It depends how large your arm is, right? Or do we give the person the standard amma of the base of Mikdash? What that means, there's nothing about the base of Mikdash. In the base of Mikdash, there was like a ruler, which was like they have in certain places, like this is the clock that everyone, in whatever, everyone measures a clock to this. So in the base of Mikdash, there was a central place. They had a ruler. This was the amma. This was like the defined amma. So is it a defined objective thing, or is it subjective, each person on their own? So Gemara says, Im Amar Lecha Amma Shel Kodesh Yavin Le, and if Rapapa, again, Ramashash is telling his son, when you go to yeshiva, ask this question of your rabbi. Is it subjective? Okay, each person their own, or is it this objective measurement? And if he tells you that it's a Shel Kodesh Yavin Le, that we give him the objective one, Og Melech Habasha Matehelav. Let's say you have someone who's a giant, like Og. That's another way of saying, let's say you have a person who's really tall, right? You have some basketball player, I'm playing on the guy's name, whatever, some really, really tall guy, and sorry? Manubal, thank you. Okay, how tall is he? 7'7". That's totally unfair. Okay. He's a big boy chick. Okay. So his span, right? You ever see these guys? So his span is presumably much larger, right? And more than his span. I mean, if we give him the objective 4 amos, this guy, how's he going to lie down? Let's say I was stuck outside the tchum, right? He's going to lie down like this. He's going to be like crunched up. That's not like, that makes no sense, right? And if you say, you're right, we do it subjectively, there is a Mishnah in Maseches Kelim where it says that there's a number of things where are completely subjective, where there are measurements, we say it goes according to the person's size, right? And it gives a whole list of things where we do things according to a person's personal size, whether they're what they can fit in their mouth, whatever different things. And it doesn't list this. It doesn't list the tchum. So he says, Ki asla Papa. So fine. He asks questions. He's ready. He goes to Papa, and Amalei Papa says to him, if you'd analyze text so precisely, we would never teach anything. It's a very strange answer. I don't fully understand this, and I looked a little bit. I didn't see anyone really address this. Basically saying stop being so analytical, which is no, that's literally what we do. So I don't know. I'm sure there's more to it. I really just don't know what he's saying. Fine, but the bottom line is he says nonetheless, even though he thinks the question is a little bit too much, he says really it's subjective. You give a person his his own amma. So you asked me, why is it not listed in Maseches Kelim with the list of subjective things? Because although we normally give a person a subjective measurement, it's not absolute. Why? There's a person who has dwarfed limbs. Not a dwarf. If a person is dwarfed across the board, a person is small. I think small people, is that the politically correct term we use nowadays? Thank you, David. Whatever. Okay, I'm on recording over here. You're standing back. No one knows who you are. It's David Spiegelman. I'm just kidding. Anyway, the point is, if it's a small person across the ground, completely, then it's fine because they only need a small space. But let's say you have a person, right, who is regular size, but their arms are very small, right? You see someone whose arms are very small. So if we give that person subjective arba amos, a subjective, 4 of these, and they're very, very small arms, and they're normal size person, they're going to be in this like messed up space. So the reason, so he says, really, it is subjective. So you asked me why your question then, and then that answers how we deal with Mr. Basketball Player, whatever his name was. But the reason, which was also supplied to us by David Spiegelman. But the point is that why doesn't it list it in the cases of subjective sizes? Because it's not always true. In a case where a person has very small limbs and a regular sized body, we would give the person the 4. There we would default to the 4 general amos, and that's why it's not in that list. Okay, fine. The Gemara says. Let's finish this up. Okay, we had the end of the Mishnah was a little bit funny. The Mishnah told us a case where you had 3 tchumen. Remember, we had 3 people, and you had a tchum over, and because they all went past 3 people walked past their tchum. They're spacing out. They walk past the tchum. They each have 4 amos. Okay, and you have person over here, you have person over here, and you have person in the middle who has spacing overlap. And we said they're all allowed to use the space in the middle, right? They're all allowed to share with the guy in the middle, right? And Rav Shimon comes along and says, "Oh, this is like a case. We have 3 chatzeros, 3 courtyards, courtyard here, courtyard here, courtyard here, and they both make Erev with this guy, and they're able to share with the middle guy, but they can't do anything with each other." So the Gemara says, why is Rav Shimon like saying this? Like shkayach, like, oh, it's similar to this case. Like what's he getting at? Like there has to be a point he's making. So it's actually Rav Shimon over here wasn't just telling us a cute little connection. He was actually saying something to the rabbis. He says, what's our case over here that's Tchumen similar to? It's the case of 3 chatzeros that we just talked about. He was actually asking a question. In that case, the 3 courtyards, the rabbis actually disagree. They say no one can carry in that case. In the case of 3 courtyards, they say no one's allowed to carry. Why? Because people get confused. They'll say, just like I can carry to the middle person, I could then carry to the outer ones. It's going to get too confusing, right? Because we're saying, no, everyone in the outer ones could share with the guy in the middle, but they can't share with the outside ones. Way too confusing. She says, why is it any different than our case over here of 3 tchumen? Person number 1, person number 2, person number 3, they could share with person number 2, but they can't share with each other. It's exactly the same thing. Why in one case the Rabbanan disagree, and in another case they don't disagree? For Rabbanan, the Rabbanan say, Hasam afshe diyorin, hachalo afshe diyorin. They say no. When you have a courtyard full of people, and there's going to be different opinions, a lot of people, then it's hard to manage things, right? If it's, crowd control is very difficult. You have a whole bunch of people, it's hard to tell them what to do. But when it's just 3 people, they'll be cognizant of what's going on over here, and therefore they're not going to mess up and start bringing from guy A to guy C. They'll only share with, guy B. But in a case of a courtyard, 3 courtyards, this guy's going to see, this guy's not going to know, and they're going to start carrying all between another. And that's when the case of the chatzeros, the courtyards, the Chum said, nothing doing, no one's allowed to carry it all. But 3 people, we can manage that, and therefore they do not have that restriction. Have a great day. Good Shabbos.